Welcome to Alasquatch, the show all about Bigfoot in the great state of Alaska. I'm your host, Beans Baxter. So lace up your boots, zip up your coat, and come with me on an adventure as we explore all things cryptid in the last frontier. All right, so we're back with Jessie Desmond here. We're continuing our conversation on all things creepy here in Alaska, and she's going to tell us all about UFOs and shadow people this week. So go ahead, Jessie.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with UFOs and end with shadow people. UFOs, Alaska is actually a really major hotspot for UFO activity. I'm currently in the middle of writing a book about the history of UFOs over Alaskan airspace, and it goes really far back, actually, which surprises most people. And do we have abductions? We absolutely do. I would tell you about some recent abduction cases, but when I was with MUFON, they came over to me, and I just can't because I have to respect people's privacy. But they are currently happening, so be aware of that. What I really wanted to get to was a story of animal mutilation, because you always hear about this in like the Southwest. You hear about cows and horses and stuff being mutilated mysteriously. And I actually came across a story from, what year is this? I want to say 1977 of an incident that happened. And it happened for the most part outside of Eagle, Alaska, which is really close to the Alaska border, but you kind of have to go out of your way to get there. And let's see here. Okay, so there were, I want to say there were four grad students from New York who decided to come up to Alaska to do some hiking, kind of get out in the middle of nowhere and do some camping and stuff like that. And they had gone to Eagle and they were hiking outside around Eagle. So they were a few miles away from Eagle, but they were close. And one night they camped out on this ridge, and one guy got up early, like before all the others, to go to the bathroom. And he got out and he said that there were a ton of UFOs kind of overhead, and he didn't know what was going on, and he's kind of watching him while he's doing his business. And then he woke people up, and he saw one lift up from the valley below and join the others, and then they all kind of went away. And he said it happened fairly fast. Like, he walked out as it was happening, and he peed, and he's watching it happen. And so when the others came out, they didn't really see a whole bunch. And this guy was like, "Oh, we have to go see where that thing landed." So they hiked down into the valley to try and find where this craft had landed down below. And they came across, they came across a circle impression in like the natural grasses and shrubbery and stuff like that. Like, everything was kind of pressed down and kind of swirled in the same sort of direction,
Mm-hmm.
And they found scorched earth. They found 4 triangular imprints, which they assumed were like some kind of landing gear pressed into the dirt. They found a 14-foot young killer whale carcass, which is impressive. Sorry, I need a drink of water. They found a grizzly cub carcass. They found an adult grizzly carcass. They found elk and caribou bodies, and they found this stuff called angel hair, which is like this weird um, filament. Excuse me. This weird filament that disintegrates when you handle it. And they've found that kind of stuff before, um, like in Washington State and stuff. Hang on,
Yeah.
hang on. I'm so sorry. My throat got really dry.
Yeah, I've actually, I think some maybe you have told me about this before, and
Yeah,
where
it's
they
probably
come
me.
across all these different animal bodies, and it's it's kind of interesting. I would wonder, did they inspect any of them to see if there was any commonality between them, like were they all missing certain the same organs or anything like that?
Uh, let's see here. The bears were like missing their paws, and the whale carcass. Uh, the whale carcass had been picked at, and they didn't really go into what had been taken from the whale carcass. Um, but the elk and caribou, um, they they had like they had like soft parts taken, and like their antlers and stuff were cut off and gone, and just just weird. Like that's such a weird thing. And then the whale just gets me because if you look at a map, if you look where Eagle is,
Yeah, it's nowhere near
it's
the ocean.
it is not near the ocean. It's like 450 miles north, and it's very inland, and you have to there's no direct road from there to the ocean. There's you have Wrangell St. Elias National Park in the way, you know, plus other mountains. And what's really cool is the person who put this article together, they actually found a like a park ranger who was on a ferry going to like Juneau or something, and they saw some kind of UFO go down and like scoop something in the water, and they couldn't really tell what. And that had been a couple days before this sighting was reported, so that's kind of cool. Um, because
Yeah.
I think that ties into it, which is what the article kind of gets at. And okay, so these four grad students, one of them was a geology major, and so he apparently there was like some kind of rocks or something that was left over. So he kind of gathered some of those, and they decided to kind of go back to civilization. And he tried to fly out from Anchorage back to New York with these rock things, but they got confiscated, and they were approached by some strange men in black at one point. So, uh, it does this kind of stuff happen? Yeah, it out in the middle of nowhere. That's where it happens.
Yeah.
I mean that would be a pretty creepy scene to come on. Like there wasn't a whole bunch of blood or anything that was reported. It was just these animals with like stuff removed from them, and a lot of animals, a lot of weird animals.
Yeah, one of the things that fascinates me about the animal mutilation cases, like in the Southwest, like you were talking about, was they always, it seems like they always put the animals back where they got them. Like they always like take it back to the, if they even take it away, but they always leave the animal there. But the whale, that's interesting because it was so far away from where they got it. It kind of breaks from from their MO, where they put the animals back where they got them. If they brought it that far inland and just left it, and I wonder if it's got something to do with like, well, the cows belong to this person, so we got to leave them here, but the whale didn't belong to anybody, so they can just leave it wherever. Or it's kind of weird. It's an
Yeah,
odd.
this is more like wild animals being mutilated.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's and it almost seems like they went out, collected stuff, and then said, "Hey, no one's going to be out here in the middle of nowhere. We can take our time to do whatever to these animals, and then just kind of leave, and no one's going to be out here." Of course, they were wrong, but um, I don't even know how to begin to explain what was going on. It just
Yeah. I'm trying to imagine walking through the woods, like inland, pretty far inland, and coming across like a whale skull or something. I don't know what I would think about that. I would probably like, unless it was fresh and still had meat on it, I'd probably just be like, oh, there must have been water here at some time.
yeah, that's what I would think too. So I don't know. I did try and reach out to some of these people, and I wasn't really able to find. I found one person that gets mentioned in the story, and I won't tell you who he is because he really was not happy that I had found him. So I'm going to respect that. But I mentioned really vaguely. I said, "Hey, I came across this article from the '70s, and I was hoping to talk to you about it." I'm from Alaska, and I didn't mention anything with UFOs or anything like that. I just mentioned Alaska and this article, and this guy just told me to leave it alone. He said he said, "Nope, not talking about it. It was fake. Don't look into it," and basically just tried to shut it down.
Hmm.
And I was like, that's crazy because I could have been talking about I don't know, an art of National Geographic article or something. It could have been a number of things, but he knew exactly what I was talking about. So that was that's pretty cool. I think for me as a researcher, that's pretty cool, because that pure denial without giving him any tips on what I was after, uh, that in itself is almost it is like the opposite of denial. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's his quick denial is proof that it happened, kind of a thing.
Yeah. I mean, he could have just been like, I don't know what you're talking about. You got the wrong guy.
Yeah, he could
Yeah.
have easily been like, "Oh no, that wasn't me. That was someone else," or something, and I'd be like, "Oh, okay," and I would have
Yeah.
just moved on.
I've never been to
No
Alaska.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was, and that's like a weird response. And sometimes I dig stuff up and I talk to people, and that's the kind of response I get. And even though it's just pure denial, and you don't get an interview out of it, it's it's interesting, and it in itself kind of validates information, I guess.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
because, yeah,
it's a denial without, it's a, yeah, we used to do the same thing when we would interrogate people about, crimes and stuff. And, you would say something like, oh, you stole a purse and it had a gun in it. And the guy would be like, I didn't steal nothing. And there was no gun in that purse. You
right.
know, it's like, well, you just said you stole it because you knew there was no gun in it.
And yeah, and I tried. I was purposefully tried to avoid using any leading terms. I just basic facts. It's an article. It's from the '70s. You know, your name was mentioned. So are you this person from this article who had this job at the time? He could have just easily said no. So okay.
Yeah.
So that is my spooky UFO story. Um, Alaska does have its own UFO day, and it's coming up in November. So November 17th is Alaska UFO Day, because that's when the big famous uh, Flight 1628 incident happens, and that was 1986. So if you want to Google that, you can find all kinds of crazy UFO articles and stuff.
Yeah.
And
That's one of the few. UFO incidents where you can actually follow the negative impact that it had on the witness's life, because he actually, the pilot, he was actually grounded for a while after he came forward with that story.
Right, and he had been a military pilot from Japan because JAL is Japanese Airlines, and he had like 10,000 hours or so of airtime. So he was like that's a lot of airtime for a pilot. Um, so he wasn't just like some newbie, you know. He was kind of this older guy. Um, he had military experience, and then he had all this flying time as pilot, like a commercial pilot, and it's an important sighting because there were three UFOs involved. There's two smaller ones and one like gigantic mothership thing, and it kind of they caught it on radar. They caught it on military radar, and they caught it on FAA radar, which is like the airline radar, and they were able to track it. And you can actually, it's really cool because the FAA at the time was like, hey, if you wanted a copy of all this information that we have on this incident, uh, it'll cost you like shipping and handling basically, and you can send us a letter and we'll send you a packet of information. So that means you can go to the Library of Congress and download all the information on this, which is really cool, right? And so what happened was uh, the flight, they were supposed to land in Anchorage. They were coming from Iceland with a shipment. It was just a cargo plane, so they had a shipment of wine. And as they crossed Alaska airspace, these UFOs kind of flew around their plane, and they crossed over um, Fairbanks, and that's kind of when they started seeing this mothership, this big giant kind of walnut shaped mothership, and it followed them, and they requested to do some evasive maneuvering with with a cargo plane, which is weird. And their flight path, when they get closer to Talkeetna, they actually do a big loop de loop. And Elmendorf sent jets out and stuff, and the jets didn't see anything because the UFOs had flown off at that point. But they continued on and landed in Anchorage. So it was it's kind of a big deal, and a lot of people have forgotten about it. But since that happened on November 17th, 1986, November 17th is now Alaska UFO Day. So I
Yeah, that's great. That, I mean, that's one of the things about one of the Alaska UFO events that you see quite a bit on, like, I think Alaska
yeah.
Triangle did a thing on it, and a few other shows. But
Yeah,
it's
there's been a lot of if there's a UFO show that you know for sure that they have covered it at some point. Um,
yeah,
the uh, the state director before I was state director, he was on like a History Channel show or something, and he was talking about it, and it's one of those that comes up regularly.
yeah. It's one of the better documented accounts by an airline pilot, I think, because you've got the radar confirmation, and then you've got all the radio traffic
Two
logs and stuff
two
like that.
radar confirmation,
Yeah. So
which is really cool. So I don't know. As a UFO kind of person, I don't know. I get real excited about it because there's so much out there, so much information that's publicly available. Um, yeah. Then people tried saying that it was like Jupiter. That was a popular thing. Oh, the pilot was just looking at Jupiter, and it's I don't
yeah,
know. Jupiter's a big planet, but not when you're looking at it from Earth.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'm not really into astronomy or anything, but I've never looked up into the sky and saw a planet and thought that it was anything but a planet or a star. Like, I don't see how you could look at anything other, maybe the moon, and think, oh my gosh, that's there's a craft flying over me. I don't
Right.
know. I think it's a lame excuse for a lot of UFO skeptics.
Well, they definitely tried their hardest to come up with reasons for this sighting, but they nothing really pans out. So it's one of those things. If you want to look it up, definitely look it up. You can Google it. You can go to the Library of Congress. You can do a newspaper search for it. You can find a whole bunch of stuff. Um, and of course, in the future, you can find it mentioned in my book, which will be coming out at some point. It's not quite finished yet. So that's all I really wanted to talk about for UFOs. I know that's not a whole lot, but we have animal mutilations and a publicly well known UFO sighting.
Well, I mean, our animal mutilation case has a whale, so I mean that's more than a lot of other states can boast. So
And it has a separate sighting that almost confirms the whale as well. So,
yeah.
and that's yeah, that one that took me a while to like kind of dig out, and I that'll be in my book more in depth, more in depth. Um, okay, so I do have some stuff on shadow people because I know a lot of people like shadow people. There's a couple documentaries that you can find on like Amazon or Netflix about excuse me, about shadow people. Let me grab some more water real quick.
Yeah, shadow people is it's also kind of a popular topic among Fortean and cryptozoology people nowadays. It's something that's probably just kind of come out here. Well, I say come out. It's kind of something that's just started to be talk about here in the last, like, I don't know, 10 years or so.
Uh, I almost want to say that there was like an X Files episode on shadow people, but I'm not placing it right at the moment. So I mean, it's been out there. It just I think because of the internet, it's been more talked about recently.
Yeah. Well, it's
You
kind of like
know?
Dogman. I mean, there's been werewolf and dogman legends for hundreds of years,
Yeah.
but it seems like just now here in the past few years they've kind of started to, I don't want to say hit the mainstream, but I mean hit more mainstream Fortean venues, I guess. And it's kind of the same with shadow people, where there's been talk and legends of them for years, and now they're just kind of starting to have their time, I guess, in the spotlight. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So I guess we should probably mention what a shadow person is. Uh, the honest answer is I don't know what it is. It's if you want a description, it's like someone took a shadow that you might see on the wall of a person and but it's like standing in the middle of your room, and it moves. Uh, and sometimes people hear noise and stuff associated with it, and it's really creepy. It's really creepy, and I say that because I've had shadow people and creature experiences, and they are just pretty creepy. So let me start by saying that the Inuits they had some shadow people incidents. They called them uh, the Takriaksut. I'm probably butchering that name, but that's what they called them. And basically, they they think that they have like this other realm that they live in, and that they can cross over to our realm. And that a lot of times, if you're out in the woods by yourself, or if you kind of get lost or whatever, if you start hearing like a like almost like a whispering, like you can hear some kind of sound like that, but you can't really make out what's being said. Like that's their shadow people. And sometimes you see them, and sometimes like they just seem to disappear, and they either like go into trees or they go into the ground or something to disappear or something. And it there's really not a whole lot that I could find on them, but I mean,
That's pretty creepy because it reminds me of that thing that happened to me in Washington where I was standing there and I heard it sounded like whispering behind me. But
I've heard whispering in the woods, and that was just growing up. Like
yeah,
I heard some whispering in the woods.
that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up when you said that because I it reminded me of that incident. Um, do you want? Can you spell that name so the people at home can Google this if they want to look it up?
Sure. Okay, so I found this at inuitmyths.com, and the way you spell it is Taqriaqsuit.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
I know when I talk about stuff like that, I butcher the names, so I always try and spell it so people can look it up for themselves. Because if you went by the way I pronounce it, it's probably not saying it right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's they use a lot of cues in their language. So, um it was kind of interesting to find the Inuit myth because it doesn't get mentioned very often, which is why I wanted to mention it. Uh, shadow people, I know. Okay, so the most popular shadow people that stories that you'll come across if you look it up online is probably you'll hear about the Hat Man, which is like super popular. It looks like it looks like a shadowy figure of a guy in like a of either like just a figure of a guy, or maybe he's wearing a trench coat or something, but he definitely has like a hat, like a fedora or something, or some kind, some kind of similar sort of hat. And it's just like you don't see features or anything. You don't see the brim come out or anything like that. It's a very flat sort of thing, and it just but it's not against the wall. It's like in the middle of the room, or it moves down the hallway, or it's standing next to like someone's bed or something. It's really bizarre. Uh, the other popular one is called Head and Shoulders, and it's like if someone was standing there and all you could see was like an outline of like their head and shoulders, and they're instead of like with a hat,
I've
you
never heard
know.
of that one. I've heard of the Hat Man, but I've never heard of the Head and Shoulder.
Well, Head and Shoulders is what I grew up seeing a lot of. Um, and actually, I don't know what happens with the area that I grew up, but Shadow People was like that was it. That was uh, there was a shadow person that hung out in the back of like in the woods in the back of the house, and I would see him occasionally, and I stopped going out there. I mean, unless I was forced to mow the yard or something growing up, but I would usually kind of avoid that area and then just kind of get in trouble for missing a spot of the yard because it was easier to deal with because it'd be the middle of the day and I in the summer and I'd see this dude out there and it was creepy. It was creepy because you couldn't see any features, and it's like he knew when I was looking at him from the kitchen window. It was it was so bizarre. Um, and then growing up, like we had like a 3 bedroom house, right? So as a little kid, like I shared a room with my sister, and during that time, I would see like this Head and Shoulders thing, and it's like it just would watch me from the middle of the room, and it was so weird. Like I I had sleeping issues as a kid, but so if I woke up and I saw this thing just kind of looming there, because you'd get like a little bit of light coming in from like the neighbor's house, and you can still see shadows in even in the middle of winter when it's like that. And it was there, and it was just watching me, and I don't know what it ever wanted. Um, and I would just like freeze in place, and it's not that I couldn't move. I was just frightened, and sometimes I would pretend that I was still asleep, and I would shift just to make myself a little more comfortable. So I know it wasn't like some kind of sleep paralysis, which is what everyone says. I could move, I just didn't want it to know that I was awake. If that, and
Yeah.
that's so I spent a lot of terrifying years in that state. Um, and now I have some major sleep issues with chronic insomnia and stuff. Uh, and I asked my parents. I grew up in North Pole, so North Pole Middle actually starts at sixth grade, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. So when I hit sixth grade, I was like, I need my own bedroom. Can I move across the hall into the spare room? And my parents said, sure, but no more of this weird you see stuff coming out of your closet, shadow person kind of stuff. And I was like, great, no problem. I literally had no issue in that other room. Um, I did see stuff in the hallway, but never in my room once I moved across the hall. And that just kind of scared me even more because I started seeing, I, I had a black lab at one point, and I was like, oh no, like the dog's out. And I'd look, and there, if he wasn't even outside, he would be inside, and there wouldn't be another dog out. Um, and so I've seen dogs, I've seen cats. At one point, I thought uh, like a giant rat had gotten into my apartment when I was living in Oregon, and there was nothing. I mean, I that kind of that was so weird. Because I grabbed the broom, and I like for an hour I was trying to search for something, and I didn't find anything. I didn't hear anything, and I couldn't find any place where it would have come in. And I sometimes I see people or like shadow figure like walk by, and it'll be like outside, and that's really creepy. Um, there was one time at work when I was in Oregon, and I was working this hotel job at the time, and I just about I was at the front desk, right? And there's always two of us at the front desk, and I like hit the floor, and I thought this bird had gotten in, uh, and like had swooped down or something, like it was trying to find its way out. And like the guy that I was working with at the front desk, like we're both looking for some stupid bird, and we got the driver, the shuttle driver to come in and look for this bird, and there was no bird. So I don't hear a lot of people talk about shadow critters like that, but
Mm-hmm.
I seem to have really had a lot of experiences with shadow critters. So one thing that I am a little worried about is since I'm mentioning this, I'm kind of worried that they're going to show up again because it seems like the more you talk about it, the more you think about it, uh, the easier it is for them to find you. Almost like
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to. Like if I move, I'm worried about how long will it take them to find me, and because I don't know what it is, I don't know what they want.
Yeah. Well, you made the point earlier when you were talking about the Athabascan legend about how there's not a lot of mentions of it. It's kind of hard to find.
Hmm.
And I was going to make the point, like, yeah, a lot of native legends they don't like to talk about it because they feel to talk about it is to invite it to you or to call it to you.
I Yeah, and I battle with that with gathering stories and stuff from people, and I know that I'm part Athabascan, and I really hate the fact that I don't want to talk about it because I do want to talk about it. I just don't want to talk about it a whole lot because I this is something that I really want to avoid. So
Yeah.
if that
Well,
makes sense,
I mean, if it makes you feel any better, I
yeah.
talk about this stuff all the time, and I've never I've never had any encounters with it. But I think a lot of times it's focused on it can be focused on areas like geographical areas and people. I don't know. It's kind of weird how it works like that. How some people seem to be more prone to it, and some areas seem to be more prone to it than others.
Well, hopefully they won't find me anymore. So hopefully it's over and done with. But I know a lot of people that they're like, "Oh, is there like I think I just saw a dog in the yard or a cat or something." And they look and there's nothing there, you know. And a lot of times when I would see these things like outside and I'd go check it out, it would be really silent for a while outside. And then you get like the squirrels and the birds chittering again and whatever. And it comes back, but it's like there's a weird silence that happens.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if that could be like a thinning of the veil or something there, where you always hear about that eerie silence before something creepy happens.
Possibly. I haven't quite figured it out. Excuse me. I have a lot of sinus issues going on right now. Okay. So I haven't really figured it out, and people are always asking me like, "Oh, do you think it's a ghost or something?" I think they're different than a ghost. I think they might be from like a different dimension or something, and they just have the ability to cross over. But
Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
wonder often if they're even really if they're really here, or it's just kind of their you're kind of their, I don't want to say shadow, but their outline or whatever that we're seeing, and they're not really physically here. It's just maybe they're bleeding through just a little bit.
yeah, I have no idea. But that does, now we have the whole like parallel universe kind of theories going on with oh gosh, I totally look at this stuff all the time and I totally forgot the name of it. Uh, with like the Berenstein Bears, or is it Berenstain? Is it
The Mandela
Berenstein?
effect.
Mandela effect. Thank you. Um, there's a lot of that stuff going on, and I took some notes about stuff that I recall until about 96, and it's different than what we have today. Like, it goes up to 96. I That's where I've documented it. So I don't I don't know if something's happened, but I don't know. Like I remember some stuff that just people claim didn't happen.
Well, I wonder if it's not necessarily because people say, "Oh, it's a multiverse kind of thing." I wonder maybe if it's not like some kind of time travel thing where people are going back and changing things, and it's kind of a ripple effect for something that got changed.
That could be
And
it.
yeah,
That
it's
but
it's
wouldn't
kind
that
of
be some kind of multiverse thing as well?
well, it depends. It
Because
depends
you have
on whether
different
the
time
timeline
streams.
splits off.
Yeah.
If it splits, then yeah, it is a different universe. But if it's just like a ripple effect where it changes, but we're in the same timeline. I mean, it depends on how time works. I guess I don't know enough about it to really be able to speak intelligently about it. But I think it could be some kind of time travel, Back to the Future scenario where something got changed, and we're seeing the ripple effects from that. Which, I mean, I don't know why the Bernstein Bears would be the Bears from somebody going back in the time, but I don't know. Maybe it's like something's got to change, so it's got to be that. It's gonna be something. So maybe
I
I don't
remember
know.
like I had a lot of Berenstain Bears books growing up, and I remember it like you pronounced it as Berenstein, but it had an A in it So it looked like Berenstain Bears or something. It was something like that, and I always thought that was kind of weird because there was a cartoon for a little bit at one point for that book series as well, and they would say Berenstein.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I attributed my misremembering of that as just to growing up in the South, and I just kind of figured like, well, nobody knew how to pronounce it, so they just called it Bernstein. You know, because I mean, we were from the South anyway, so I didn't think that big of a deal. The Mandela effect that freaks me out the most is the Shazam movie
I remember it
because
coming out. I didn't watch it because I it came out like when I was in like fifth or sixth grade or something like that, and I remember it, and I was like, "Ah, I don't want to watch some Sinbad movie," and because Sinbad had his own show, he had like a show
I
on
think so.
TV,
Yeah.
and I was like, when it came out, it seemed like a almost like a made for TV movie for kids, and I was like, oh, I'm too grown up for that. And then a couple years later, uh, the one with Shaq came out, and I was like, what is this? Like, why are they remaking this?
Well, I don't remember Shazam coming out. I remember seeing a trailer for it on like a VHS. You know, I'd rented a
Hmm.
movie, and there was a trailer for Shazam on that tape that I rented, and I remember thinking because I was in the comic books like growing up a lot, and they spelled Shazam with like two Z's,
Right.
and I remember watching that and thinking, how in the world are they using that name? Or you know, do they have DC Comics permission? Because DC owned Captain Marvel, you know, Shazam at that time.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm like, and I remember having that thought, like, how in the world are they able to use that name, that copyright? You know, I was like, is it just because they're spelling it different? I mean, it's still pronounced the same. And I remember thinking, like, oh, that movie's destined to have some problems. You know, even as a little kid, I realized that, like, well, they can't use that name. That's that's Captain Marvel. And
I was disappointed that it wasn't the comic book, and I was also I was I was always that kid that was kind of put off by those kind of movies because I even as a kid I didn't really care much for kid driven movies too much. Like the Goonies is fine. Monster Squad, it's just a little predictable. Um, I 28 Days Later is fine, but was it 28 weeks later like the sequel? It You're just like, "Oh, this stupid kid like crossed the line and now everyone's going to have to go risk their life to save this person." And I just always have had an issue with that. And I saw it and it made me think of the like MC Hammer cartoon,
yeah,
because I was like, "Ugh, now he's just making a buck." You know what I mean? Like he's just making a buck.
yeah, that's the thing. Like the one thing with the Mandela effect that I can kind of point to, and because some of them I'm kind of like, well, I don't really
Yeah.
remember that, or I don't really know about that. I kind of remember. I want to say I heard about Nelson Mandela dying in prison, but that doesn't really, that's not. I never really paid attention to that kind of stuff, so I could be misremembering that. But I would almost swear that I saw that Shazam trailer on a VHS that I rented. I remember it vividly, and I remember having the thoughts about like, man, they can't use that name. That's that's for Captain Marvel, and DC owns that. And I think I even remember like I never saw the movie like come out, and I always kind of thought like, oh, they wouldn't let them do it because of the name. Like it got canned and never came out. But yeah,
Well, and
that's
I remember they basically had Sinbad wearing like Sinbad's usual clothes, except like the the vest was like metallic or something like gold or something shimmery, and he had like a turban on or something and a bigger earring. And I mean, they had like his genie look or whatever as well, but that was like his human genie look. And then they came out with like they came out with a fake trailer. I think it was Funny or Die or something. Uh, did some kind of trailer, and I was like, that's pretty much it. Like that's almost the look that he had, but the colors are different.
Yeah.
And I have like a whole list of things
Well,
for this, so I know that's probably not spooky stuff, but I do have the Shazam movie written down. Um, oh, and one thing that was bothering me was, I mean, I was a little kid at the time, and so I don't remember things entirely because I wasn't reading the news all the time. You know, I was in like elementary school. But in like 88 or 89, I thought NASA was working on a new space station and they were going to be growing plants and stuff in there. And I saw like some mock up drawings, and I want to say it was in like Popular Mechanics or Popular Science or something. And it was a wheel shaped sort of thing, and kind of like the Werner von Braun design, but it was white. They had a lot of white on the design, and I remember like this cutaway, and it showed people working in a lab uh, with plants and stuff like that. And I don't, I don't know whatever happened to that. And now we have space stations up there, but they're nothing like this design that I recall happening. And I was really looking forward to it um, at the time because I was, you know, space. I'm a kid, and space
yeah.
is really cool. And I'm an
Well,
adult now, and space is still really cool. So
yeah. Oh, yeah, William Shatner. Did you see William Shatner went up and
I I was like, oh, that's today. So I was watching it, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to go to work early, and I live right above the office, so I went downstairs about 15 minutes early to watch the entire thing because I my thought was either it's going to be another successful launch and touchdown, which was what I was hoping for, or Jeff Bezos was going to have an accident and kill Captain Kirk, which I was not down for. So I watched because I was half worried that that would happen.
yeah? I mean,
I
I'm
didn't
glad
want
it
to.
didn't happen.
I
I'm glad
didn't
it was
want
a
a shuttle
successful
disaster to
mission. But
happen.
I mean, what he's like 90? Is he 92, 94 years old?
He's just 90.
But I
90.
mean,
Yeah,
that's
I
how. I mean, that's how
I
I
was
want to go when I'm 90. I'm. It's like, well, they were trying to blast him into space and it didn't work.
I don't usually get emotional about stuff, but I was really happy for him, and I was like, oh, it's okay. You don't have to like. I almost started tearing up because I was just so like it couldn't have happened to a better person. You know what I mean? Like I mean, I guess the only thing that could top Shatner going into space would be to have all the Star Trek captains go into space. You know, like at the same time. That would be really cool. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I know it's only like they go up and they come down. And it doesn't take too long, but um, I was, for whatever reason, it got me a little emotional. And I'm an INTJ if you follow the Myers Briggs stuff.
Yeah,
And
I am
so
too. Yep.
emotions aren't really my thing. I'm like a human Vulcan, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That was a pretty cool launch, and I'm glad it was successful. I'm glad that we actually have a Star Trek character that's actually been to space.
Well, there. Oh, wait. There was an astronaut, and she was an astronaut first, and then she showed up on Next Generation as a
Oh,
crew
okay.
member, as
Yeah.
a yellow shirt crew member, and oh gosh, what was her name? I totally forgot her name. She's a black lady. She kind of had shorter hair, but she was in like a gold uniform, and she was on the bridge.
Oh, right on. I wasn't aware
Um,
of that, but we've got
yeah.
the captain, the first captain in the space, I guess we'll say.
So I'm a little bit of a Trekkie if you can't tell. So
I haven't followed any of the new stuff, but I was a big Next Generation fan when it first came out, and watched. I think I watched pretty much the whole series when it was on TV, and some of Voyager, and then I kind of lost it around Voyager. Deep Space Nine was great,
um,
and the later
I
seasons.
I've seen everything unless there's a new episode of Lower Decks that I've missed, which there isn't. I'm caught up on that.
Yeah,
So I'm waiting for the next season of Discovery to come out, and I don't know. I have Lower Decks. I'm a little on Lower Decks. It's okay. And,
yeah. I haven't seen
um,
any of. I don't have the Paramount Plus, but it it just reminds me of like Rick and Morty meets Family Guy meets Star Trek or something. I don't know. It just doesn't. Yeah.
it kind of is. It's a little like I watch it while I'm making breakfast. After the gym, I turn it on or something and then make breakfast and then watch it. But so it kind of gets me through that little morning portion of my day. But it's it's okay. I heard that there's going to be like a new show about the Starfleet Academy coming out,
Yeah,
so I'm
that
excited about that.
that might be cool. Hey, I had an idea, just real quick before we wrap things up. So I didn't grow up in Alaska.
Hmm.
I grew up in the South, and I always know, like when we did Halloween, when Halloween was, when we'd go out trick or treating, even in the South, it would get kind of chilly around, October 31st. It was a little colder, and I remember like having to wear like sweaters and stuff under my Halloween costumes. So, can you give us some insight into what it was like, what a typical Alaska Halloween was like when you were growing up?
Well, some people had two different costumes, right? They had their indoor costume, which is like what you would wear to your classroom for Halloween or something like that. Like one of mine, I went as a mummy, so like I had my hair wrapped and I took long johns and had bandages, wrapping kind of stuff around that so that I could easily go to the bathroom. In case you're interested in being a mummy, that's a good way to go. um, and then you'd have like your costume that would fit over your outdoor gear. So growing up, that was a heavy, ugly jacket, and because it was the '90s for me, early '90s, like you see those '80s ski suits out now, which are kind of making a small comeback. It was like prints like that, just in more '90s colors rather than '80s. Anyway, um, so you had your big bulky jacket, you had your snow pants and your boots and stuff like that, and your gloves, and you just had to make sure that your costume would fit over it and kind of look how you wanted it to look. Or, or you tried to make the best of being cold, and you would wear whatever you could get away with as minimal as you could, so you looked more like your character.
So, what was trick or treating like? Was it like, just walking through a neighborhood and running up to the house, get candy, and then run to the next house, or was it get out of the car, run up to the house, get back in the car, warm up, go to the next house?
Okay, so my parents were like, here's a pillowcase, here's a flashlight, have at it. Like, don't get kidnapped. That's what they were worried about the most is, but they didn't take us around in a vehicle. They were just simply like, don't get kidnapped, because there had been some serial killers and stuff in our area. um, right before I was born. Anyway, so that was a big thing. Uh, and we'd kind of go around our neighborhood and then swing back by the house and warm up for a second and then venture back out. I had to take a pee break and stuff too. Then venture back out and maybe go one street down. If it was a warm October, maybe hoof it half a mile down to like the next big road and then walk back. I mean, we stayed in the area that we were able to ride our bikes. That was the rule. You couldn't leave the area um, where you could go with your bike. So that's that's what we did. And if we got cold, we got cold, and we just had to go back home. That was, and now like people like my nephew, my sister will take him and she's like, okay, go hit those couple of houses, and he gets out of the car and he goes and he does this thing, and then he gets back in the truck and they drive on, and that's not how we used to do it. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, where I live now, I'm so remote that I never have we never have trick or treaters like ever. But we'd always take the kids to like the nice neighborhood and park near the hospital or something and let them, we'd do the loop and take them through the middle of town there. But and it was always, I mean, here down, we live down on the southern tip of the peninsula, so it's not as bad as it is in Fairbanks. It's probably in the 30s here once the sun goes down, but up there, I'm sure it was probably a lot colder than that.
Yeah, it's been getting warmer. I mean, right now my computer says it's 21 degrees outside right now. We've been getting warmer temperatures, and I mean, we used to get like it was not uncommon for it to be like 20 or 30 below at Halloween. So that's what you're dressing for was to stay warm in that kind of temperature. And I know that a lot of people, if they if they live down in the States, they're like, "Holy crap, you're gonna go outside like that?" Yeah, yeah, that's what you do. You put on your layers and you go out and you do your thing and you keep moving. Because if you stand still, that's when you get cold.
Yeah.
And then you go, "Oh,
Well,
my fingers are cold," and you go back home.
I remember, growing up in the South, it would be in the 40s and we'd be freezing. It would be because I mean we're coming off a 100-degree summer, and that's a 60-degree difference from the daytime temperature, and you were cold because it was 40 degrees. And
Hmm.
if it's 40 degrees now, I'm wearing t-shirts, but just it's a different climate.
Yeah, and I remember one year it was like 30 degrees out for Halloween, and at this point I was in high school, and my friends and my friend had a big, like old school white station wagon, so we threw a Ghostbuster sign on it and dressed up like Ghostbusters. And we spent like a month or two working on our packs and that sort of thing, so they'd look really cool. And we had this whole show of like getting out of the car and putting on the pack and that sort of thing. And we went to Denny's and we decided to swing by a hotel and ask if they had seen any ghosts. And then we went to the grocery store. I mean, we were in high school, so we didn't really know what to do. We just wanted to go show people our costumes, and we didn't have a party. It was just us going to dinner, because one of our friends could drive, and
Yeah.
we had cool costumes. So, you
All
know,
right. So, what was your all-time favorite candy to get in your Halloween bag?
oh gosh, um, I I would probably say Smarties. I was always like a fan of Smarties. Uh, but the most memorable thing I ever picked up was a full size can of Coca-Cola because my parents like never bought soda. We never had cases of soda at the house. So to get not just a fun size, but like a full soda was just like my mind was blown. And what had happened was uh, we went trick or treating, and these people had just gotten back from like a vacation or something, and they didn't have any candy, so they had soda, and they're handing out soda. I thought that was so cool. Um, I don't know, but like gummy worms and Smarties. I don't know if I ever got gummy worms trick or treating. I don't know if they had those in like small packages,
I think my
but
favorite was either Snickers or the Reese's peanut butter cups, like the full size stuff. But
we
so
usually had a lot of full size stuff handed out because people knew that kids might be only be going to like one street growing up, And
yeah.
where I grew up was in between North Pole and Fort Wainwright, so it was a little out in the sticks, but it was fairly residential, but it was still considered rural. So
So did your candy ever? Did you ever have to let your candy thaw out before you ate it? Did it ever freeze?
no, I don't like being cold for too long, so I was never outside for long enough for that to happen. So
All right. Well,
if I spent a lot of time outside, then it was probably because it was a warmer winter. Because I've never been partial to freezing myself. I'm an indoor kid for the most part.
all right. Well, Jesse, I appreciate you coming on and sharing all these stories and Halloween memories with us. And is there anything you want to promote or tell people where they can find you and your books and works and stuff like that?
Well, if you're looking for a list of everything I've done, you can go to jessiedesmond.com. And I spell my name with an IE, Jessie. And I'll send a link to Beans here so he has it on and he can post that. That's kind of my author website. One thing that I started doing, I always have books in the works. I have many books in the works. So I have this research project that's been ongoing for like 20 something years now, called it's research on this guy named Count Saint Germain. He was a real guy, and supposedly he's immortal and was really big in alchemy, but he was also a musical rival of Handel, and he was a French diplomat for Louis XV. Um, and there's all this really cool stuff. So I started doing a podcast on that, and you can find it at findingcountsaintgermain.com. And so I try real hard to get into an NPR sort of voice for that. um, and I don't know why. I try. I think I hit it a little bit. Um, but that's one of my new projects. Uh, I'm writing a book on the history of UFOs in Alaska. I'm writing a book on Count Saint Germain. Do I have any other books coming out? I have some other stuff that I'm writing. Uh, I have like a comic book script that I'm writing, but I don't know if anything's ever going to come of that. Um, I'm really bad at selling myself, so that's where the problem lies with that. Um, no, I think that's about it. I think that's about it. If you want to find me online, you can go to Facebook, type in my name, or you can find me through Alaska UFOs. It's a group, and you have to answer some questions to kind of get into the group. And I'm picky about what gets posted in there. We try and keep it to strictly Alaska stuff. We're interested in UFOs and aerial phenomenon, and like there was some meteorites or something that came down over Alaska, and so there's like some footage of that in the group and stuff. So yeah, that's how you can find me, all those different ways. all those various ways.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Jesse. We really appreciate. We always like having you on, and thanks for sharing all your content with us here that we posted over the last couple of weeks. We really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. I like doing podcast stuff. I hopefully I'm getting better at it because I'm starting to do more and more of it lately, and I just if you want me back, let me know. If
Oh,
you want
we'll
me
have
back,
you back.
I always have stories. I can always find stuff.
All right. All right, Jesse. Thanks for coming on. And you can find us at the Alasquatch Podcast website, as well as you can find my book on Amazon and just any other podcatcher out there, as well as YouTube. So thanks for listening and happy Halloween.